Hello again, Coffee Chat friend. Today I wanted to talk about a couple of words that I came across as I think kind of significant to helping us improve the quality of our life experience, to help us with our self-knowledge, which all builds us up in terms of our strength and efficiency in life, really, I guess, eh? So the words that I was going to talk about are investment, a little bit on gambling, and a little bit on assurance or insurance. Why would I want to talk about this stuff? Well, there was discussion over the over the kitchen table a couple times with the family here about the difference between, or what is investment? What really is investment? And is buying a house an investment? Is getting some gold or some silver an investment? Is getting some land an investment? Well, it depends what we mean by the terms, I suppose. Especially when we consider the other side of it, which is gambling. Like, is going out and buying a lottery ticket, is that an investment or is that a gamble? I would say that when it comes down to what I like to refer to lots of times is the controllables and the uncontrollables. I would say that gambling is partaking in things that we perceive for the most part are out of our control. Which would be, say, buying a lottery ticket. Once we buy the lottery ticket, most of us, although I used to know a guy who was scheming to try to figure out, crack the code, right? But, I mean, for the most, I don't think he ever won anything. But for the most part, it becomes a fate experience, right? It becomes a faith experience. It becomes a gamble, a pure gamble. It's like, maybe I will, but probably I won't. Or in some cases where it's a very high probability of winning, it's maybe I will and very likely I won't. Whatever, like minor things, right? And I would say the same thing is the case with typical, what we would call investments, but are not investments, in how I term them anyways. Things like buying a house, buying a little bar of gold or silver. These things are, they're kind of an opposite gamble to the buying the lottery ticket. The buying the lottery ticket is very likely I'm not going to see a return on this. And therefore it seems like more of a pure gamble, but it's more of a losing, the greater chance of losing gamble, right? Nevertheless, there's not much control that we have individually over it. The same goes for buying, say, a little bar of silver. It's a greater probability of it's a safer gamble, if you will, because very likely it's going to be worth something in a year. And immediately after you buy it, you could cash it in, whereas the lottery ticket, it's useless if it doesn't win, or worthless. Nevertheless, the bar of silver is like a gamble. But what it's like more, unlike the lottery ticket, is it's like an assurance. There's a surety. There's assuredness to that. It's like a safety to it. And that's why people buy it very often. It's like, if everything else goes, at least I have this. And the same way with a house to an extent. We buy a house, unless we fix it up, as far as the land value increasing in our area, in our wherever we live, that's kind of not out of our individual control. So once again, it's kind of like buying the silver, but it has more tangible use to it. But all of these sorts of things, this gamble, this pure gamble of the lottery ticket, the buying the silver, the buying the house, are not really investments, because we don't have any sort of ability to affect the inherent value in the moment. And if we do buy the house, as an example, to fix it up and therefore appreciate it, then it becomes an investment. Or it's an investment property, so we're going to rent it out and get a return on it. Then there's something that we have taken upon ourselves. Now, I want to go back to, and this is what I probably should have done at the beginning, is just to give a glimpse of what the etymology of these words is, which will shed some light on it, hopefully. Now, invest, in its etymology, means to clothe. We think of a vest, a little thing we wear. Well, when we're in the vest, it's like we're wearing it. So we kind of now animate the vest. We give life to that vest. And a gamble, on the other hand, is like a play, or to be merry, or to jest. It's purely just it's like an expression, right? It's like an expression, but we don't have any control over what comes back. I mean, we play a game. Most games, anyways, we don't have, especially if it's a game of chance, or if it's a game of jest, just trying to be funny. We don't know for sure if we're going to get a response, because we're having to deal with other people and circumstances and so on. So the gamble is we put out, but we don't know for sure what we're getting back, because after we've put out, everything else is kind of left to fate, circumstances, what other people are doing, what the economy's doing, all these sorts of macro forces. And that's why it's a gamble. Whereas an investment, a pure investment, is we actually don the responsibility. And this would be, an example of this would be, of an investment would be, say, say we would want to start a business. Let's suppose we had a little plot of land. When we go out in the spring, we would make little trenches in it, cultivate it up, put little seeds in it, cover them up, water them. And then throughout the summer, we pull out the weeds, make sure they get lots of water, fertilizer, whatever they need. And in time, when they grow up, it's a corn crop, let's say, we're able to pick the corn and then sell it. That's an example of us taking responsibility, donning the responsibility, if you want, investing, putting the vest on of responsibility in our actions, in our controllable aspect of our lives. And to a great extent, now, of course, there's always a spectrum all the way from pure investment to pure gamble. I mean, even then, we could have, a tornado come through and flatten our cornfield. Nevertheless, there's a greater likelihood of a proportion of what we put into it, we're able to see the rewards. Whereas if we bought a block of silver, it doesn't matter how many carvings we put on it or what we do to that silver, it's still just valued by the weight. And the value of that silver will fluctuate based on forces that we don't seem to have control over. And therefore, I would say there's a spectrum from gambling, and a lot of times gambling, especially the more assured gambling of things like buying tangibles that we're going to hope will give us some safety and some security if everything else falls away. It's like a bank account, or a stash of food, or a bar of silver. It's like a less risky gamble, but it doesn't necessarily have that return, but we buy it for a different reason. Whereas the lottery ticket is very cheap, and it's a very low chance that we would win, almost a certain failure in our gamble. Whereas an investment is where we take the responsibility in our lives, don the vest of that responsibility, we invest it, and that we have greater control over our destiny, if you will, for success or for movement in whatever it is that we're trying to do. So I would say that we all certainly do both. Take the example of the house. Once again, well, just buying the land with the building on it, well, we also do that. That is purely I mean, the value, whether the value goes up or goes down, is dependent on how our neighbor's house looks, how, what the, whether there's a mine that's found nearby and everybody comes in and it goes up in value, or the economy goes kaput, whatever it is, all these sort of macro things that are going on. So that's kind of like the whims of the gamble, if you will. And then there's things that we do to it. We might paint it, put a white picket fence, put flowers out, give it curb appeal, all these sorts of things. Those are investments. So it's an example of how so often in life we have a bit of both going on. A bit of gamble and a bit of investment. However, I would say that one of the things in terms of our growth, that we're best to put a lot of emphasis on is the investment, because that's where we can make the most change. And also, I think that, when we rely so much on the gamble, we're relying more on, faith and superstition and hoaxes and all sorts of, cultural things that are not necessarily based in our observation of, does this work as an investment where I can affect and make a difference, type of thing. No, I'm rambling a little bit, but I wanted to talk about it because I think it's important. I think it's important because so often we think that what we're doing is an investment, but in reality, we don't have a lot of control over what's going to happen with it. At the same time, though, there are many things in our lives that we can invest in and make a difference, because, like I said a couple days ago, my feeling is that life is kind of both a combination of deterministic and we have that free will within it, within our individual aspect, the things that are closer to our individual construct. And our individualism, our mind, our bodies, these sorts of things, we can make an investment in all of that. And then, of course, what we can affect on what we think is outside of us, in terms of our businesses, our organization, our people skills, our ability to communicate, all of these things that we work on are investments because we take immediate responsibility. Nobody can teach us how to speak a different language if we don't want to. We have to don the vest of that responsibility and then go to work on the necessary procedures and practices and what have you to be able to get there as a learned practice. Investment versus gamble, I would say that we do a little bit of each for sure, though in terms of our growth, improving the quality, the input that we have in improving the quality of our life experience has a great degree to do with our investment. And yes, for our safety, security, all those sorts of things as well, we might want to have some fairly assured gambles, not the very risky ones like buying lottery tickets and so on. I mean, if they're fun, something to talk about, etc., fine. That's just whoever wants to do that who's going to do it, right? Although, it's not something that, it's certainly not something on the side of, as I can see it anyways, as on the side of any kind of investment, which is where we can make the most difference, I would say, is in our investment. The vests we don on, the vests of the people we hang out with, the vests of what we're reading, what we're listening to, what we're doing, what we're practicing, how we're exercising our minds and driving our bodies to greater in health, enhanced health, more improvement, the whole process of learning about self, all of that, and then projecting that out into our projects and what have you, and in our relationships, that all to me is investment. It's very powerful and it's very important. Hope this was helpful. We can do this again for sure, perhaps as early as tomorrow. In the meantime, you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye for now. My name is Steve.